Florida, man, we're stuck in Florida here, which is not a bad thing.
No,
Doug, you're up.
especially since you're coming down. Thank you, Scott, Candace, tremendous dialogue. Thank you for sharing your time and knowledge and energy with us today. My question centers around, trying to remember, I think you wrote a piece in Forbes recently, and you spoke about sort of selling through downtimes and the recession and things of this nature. And you had talked about avoiding deep discounts. And it stuck with me because there was something that you wrote about sort of avoid the temptation. It was like year one of Sprinkles, I think. And for all intents and purposes, you know, you could add to the top line with sales, but you held true to just if you can speak to that, I think there's wonderful lessons to be shared and learned. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we live in an Amazon world. It's really hard to compete on price. And if you are going after those customers that are really price sensitive, those are also really fickle customers, because once somebody undercuts you, they're gone. So I've always been a really big believer, and this is partially because I work in businesses that there's not much moat, right? There's not much defensibility to a cupcake shop. And we saw that with the explosion of cupcake places. There's not much I can defend, you know, with pizza. So what I've had to really do is lean into brand and build a brand that is so that customers really have an emotional connection with, and a brand that is so desirable that people want to be associated with it. And actually Sprinkles, I remember we opened our largest store in Palo Alto. It was our 5th store. And, you know, it was our biggest store, our biggest investment. We were worried. We're like, is this going to take in the Bay Area? Everyone here is like such a food snob. And so we open, we've got lines down the block, and my phone starts blowing up notifications that the market is crashing. And over the next few days, I just keep getting, you know, news articles. People are losing their homes. Storied banks are failing. And here I am selling the least essential item on the history of the planet, luxury cupcakes. And I was like, well, this has been fun. This has been lots of fun, but see you later, sayonara, big lines. And, you know, Charles, well, like, this is it, right? And we ended up scaling the majority of our business through the Great Recession. And I think that really has to do with this brand that we built, and the idea that even as people's budgets were being cut, they weren't willing to cut their Sprinkles. That was still the affordable luxury that they wanted to treat themselves with, to actually, you know, forget about all the bad news at the time. But if we had just been the, you know, I don't know, cost-effective cupcake company, that wouldn't have happened. And I'll tell you, I had so much pushback on my price when I first opened. Nobody could get their head around spending $3 on a cupcake. It was really groundbreaking at the time. I mean, we take it for granted now, and I stood behind that counter and I educated everyone. I'm like, you're spending $3 on a latte at Starbucks, okay? This is what we do every day to make this cupcake. And we're baking it from scratch, and we're hand frosting it, and it's beautiful, and it's an artisanal treat made just for you. And eventually people got it, and it was great. But then the other thing I had to educate people on was the fact that people were used to baked goods being discounted at the end of the day. And the reason why that is because traditionally, this is how it was always done, and this is where innovation comes in. People would staff their one baker in the morning. They would bake what they thought they needed for the day. And so by the time you got there at 5 o'clock, those cupcakes were old and they were needing to be discounted. And so I used to see this sort of like group of people standing by the door right around closing time, and I wonder who they were. And then I realized they were waiting for me to discount the cupcakes. And I had to explain to them that we were using a just-in-time baking system, which innovatively I'd borrowed from another industry. And I was staffing bakers throughout the day so that the cupcakes you got at the end of the day were still as fresh. And so with that, and by the way, that's meant that we had waste every night. But that waste, I ended up donating to food banks and to homeless shelters at all of our locations. I would rather do that and keep the sanctity and preserve the sanctity of our brand than discount those cupcakes and make people think they weren't worth as much.
So good. So good.